Welcome everyone to another episode of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts and today I talk with IconicBeats, who's a Melbourne-based producer and engineer. We talk a lot about collaboration and the value that collaboration brings to a project, and also how working with different artists allows you to understand different recording and production techniques. This and heaps more on today's episode of What's That Sound podcast. You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts. Welcome again to another episode of What's That Sound. My name's Stu Watts. I'm here with IconicBeats today. Welcome, man.
Hello, thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Cheers.
Yeah. How's your day been so far?
Good, man. Good.
Goals.
Slow start, but yeah, we're here.
Yeah, love it. Now, for anyone that doesn't know who you are, let's give us a bit of an introduction as to who you are and what you do in the music industry.
Yep. So I'm a mix master engineer and producer.
Yep.
I started off, production. And I got into that via starting DJing. So kind of like this natural progression. And then, so I've been probably professionally in the industry for about 3 to 4 years.
Yep.
Yeah,
take us back, man. Where did music come into your life?
It came into my life. I already listening to music. I always had this feeling that I wanted to know more about it. It always hit me, and I felt like it hit me differently to other people. And then when I was younger, I just wanted to explore that. And then I just fell in love with DJing by one of my cousins. I used to go over their house probably once or twice a year. Yeah, he used to DJ parties and he used to have this setup. Every time we'd get there, I'd nag him. I'd be like, "Hey man, can we go play on the decks?" And then
it's so funny. I had cousins that had drums and guitars, and I was exactly the same. Similar, I was like, "Can we just go in the back room and just jam out?" Yeah.
Yeah, and I knew from then I had this crazy passion for it, and I loved it. And then I wanted to explore. And then parents bought me my own little DJ controller.
Sick.
I was up all hours during the day, just learning this thing, watching YouTube
How old
videos.
Were you?
Probably about 13.
Yeah.
I think it was for my 13th birthday.
Cool.
And then from there, I just I wanted to start making my own music. So then I got Ableton, and I was about 15 by this time. And then all the way from 15 to now 25, I've been producing and messing around with Ableton.
Yeah, sick. And so, what were the influences back when you were younger, when you started to getting into music?
The musical influences?
Yeah.
It was mainly all the pop music that you'd hear on the radio.
Yep.
Like your Akon, all that kind of stuff that was popping off back then.
Yep.
And I don't know, specifically, I'm not sure who else, but there weren't too, early days when I was about, I think 15, 16, I was very in the EDM scene in Melbourne. I love the EDM music. So that was a big influence on me. Kind of like your Will Sparks, all those because they were really popping off back then. Yeah. And then I kind of wanted to follow that path. And then it's funny because it wasn't until I was about 18, a friend of mine drove me home from footy training one night.
Right.
And he plays me the J. Cole's 2014 Forest Hills Drive album.
Yeah.
And I heard a few songs come driving home, and I was just like, what? I was kind of new to hip hop.
Yeah.
I'd heard it before and all that, but that was kind of my first love to hip hop.
Cool.
And then from there, I'm like, I want to produce this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I started watching YouTube videos, started learning from other people, and
that's sick.
kind of made that transition.
And that's so you're still a teenager then, moving into you getting more serious about it. Was there an obsession with music, or, what did it look like?
Yeah. So there was this point where it was about, so I kind of feel like I always had the obsession when I started DJing about 16. I'd do house parties and whatnot.
Yep.
That obsession was there, but it got real for me when I kind of went from school to university, because during school I was mainly playing sports and focusing on footy, and music was just my hobby that I would do on the side. And then it wasn't until, I went to university when I was about after school, so 18. And I really fell in love with it. I entered a course thinking I was going to do music production.
Right.
But it was engineering.
Okay.
Yeah, and like this was like this. I had this whole misconception. I didn't even know.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And then like a few classes in, I was like, this is interesting.
Yeah.
I'm like, I actually really love this, and I didn't
Where was
even know.
this?
This is at Collarts.
Collarts.
Yeah,
Okay,
Collarts.
cool.
Yeah, had this like crazy feeling. Like I loved it. I didn't know what it was, but once I started learning, I was like, yeah, I love this. And then I met people there, and then we locked in, and we kind of like collaborated, and it just went from there.
Yeah. So the school experience, I like to unpack that a bit because everyone kind of has a different experience at school, and some people, you know, find it useless. Some people like really liked it. For you, what was school like?
It was like I tell people all the time, I'm like, you can definitely learn most of this stuff on YouTube or via collaborate, like other people that you meet.
Yep.
But I think the depth that they go into, you can't learn that.
Okay.
Or you can't learn as much.
Right.
Because the depth that they go into is just like another level. Like
Yeah.
they really like the first year it was like teaching you the basics, and they like just do an overview. And then the second year, because it was a 2-year bachelor, they really broke it down and like really went into it. And like at that time, looking back, I didn't really have that much of a clue about mixing. I didn't think I had the ear for it. Like it took me a long time to build it. But yeah, like just the concepts, I feel like I'm glad that I went.
Yeah, cool.
Because I think about it now, I'm like, I could have definitely learned a lot of this stuff off YouTube.
Well, I think it's funny because when I did sound engineering at NMIT. It was, at the time, it's called Polytechnic now, but
okay.
I was a bit older. I was like 22, I think. I did 1 year of part-time, and then I did 2 years full-time.
Yep.
And the part-time I was just working as well. And the teachers weren't great because it was a night class. I don't know. They just didn't have the better teachers.
That's
so
fair.
It was funny. And then, the full-time one. But yeah, it is an interesting experience. And I think like what you can't get anywhere else apart from a school is that being around people that are really, well, most of them, not all of them, are really willing to learn and really wanting to unpack stuff that they don't know much about.
Yeah.
And because you're constantly, talking about the same concepts together, you start to really you open your mind and wanting to learn, and you don't get that if you're just watching videos on YouTube, for example.
100%.
Yeah, you don't get that. But I also think it's funny when you're younger, you don't have necessarily the idea of the world around you and stuff. So you kind of don't really know how to study. And even though you've been in school, I don't know, there's something about it for me. I didn't know how to study, and I didn't care to study. And so it was there was two sides to it. But
No, it's interesting. I think another thing a big takeaway from uni for me as well is there was such a diversity in terms of the music. So it's like certain teachers' backgrounds, they had like different backgrounds in certain kind of music. Yeah. And it's like with that, the students had a different background in like the music they play, the music they make. And it's like I was like open, and I saw all of that kind of diversity, and that kind of opened my mind.
Especially being at Collarts, because Collarts has got, I would say like places like RMIT and SAE and stuff are more dedicated in a sense of like they're very hands-on. But Collarts, because it's such a like you said, a diverse range of people and a lot of like music theory and those sorts of people that aren't necessarily in the technical world. You do get a little bit more of exposure to, and just noticing from people coming to the studios here that have gone to Collarts, it's a very artsy place. It's kind of different. There's something different about it.
It took me out of my comfort zone, definitely, because I'm more of like I like to think I'm more of a introvert, like where in a social setting, if I don't know someone, I wouldn't really go out of my way and like make a whole scene. But it kind of opened my eyes, and the whole listening to different genres was like big for me too, because I was kind of boxed into my EDM, hip hop, pop. So I was kind of boxed into that. And then when you go to Collarts, for example, you got people playing heavy metal. You got people playing all these, jazz, classical, all these crazy genres that were like different and new to me. And it just opens your eyes to realize like how much more is out there and how much more there is to music.
Yeah, for sure. And so when did you start to understand I guess, the production side of things and hone in on that world?
Yeah, so that I learnt the very basics, the very, very basics. I went and did a lesson. I remember this very clearly. I went and did a lesson with my grandfather. My grandfather took me.
Yep.
And it was, I don't even remember where it was, somewhere east side. It was quite far. It was quite far. It was like an hour and a half drive. And it was quite expensive too, but it was 3 hours with these dudes that were like big at the time. And they were like EDM producers.
Right.
And they taught me like the basics of Ableton and how to do it in like three hours.
Sure.
Very basics. And
that's fun.
yeah, then from there, I guess I was just like, I had this passion. I was like, oh, I want to do this. I had this love. And then, then it was just countless hours of like watching YouTube videos and practicing and just like learning and failing and whatever. And then, I think it was just that really. Like after that point, which I would have been, honestly, I would have been about 16 or just before I was 16. Yeah, when I had that lesson. So from there, it was just countless hours on YouTube.
Yeah, cool. And so the YouTube, was that you like watching producers that you loved, or more like tutorials of randoms?
It was, well, back then, I didn't really...
It was different back then, I know.
Yeah, and I didn't really have like the producers that I loved, like, because I wasn't really that into it yet. I didn't know who the kind of producers were. But yeah, I think it was just tutorials, because there were a few people doing it at the time, like, because it was new back then, like 10 years ago, it was new to do like the whole tutorial about music.
100%.
It was very new. So, and I found a few people and I just watched all their tutorials. And even though a lot of them were based on the EDM scene, like there was much more based on the EDM world, I kind of took what I learned and just implemented it when I made that transition to like the hip hop. Because there wasn't much on hip hop back then.
Nah, and I don't think hip hop was as big as it is now.
Oh yeah,
like I mean, it's obvious that it's not, but it wasn't. It feels weird to put yourself back then, because the scene, you know, learning, social media, everything was different.
Yeah,
and I think people started to really take advantage of, you know, that side of things probably only 4 or 5 years ago, I would say. I want to know, like, who are the producers for you that are like your like goats? You know?
I think John Bellion is one that like I can say straight away, and he's a pop artist. But his production is just incredible. Cool. And even his songwriting, I love his songwriting, but production, out of this world. Next like he released an album, Glory Sound Prep, in 2018, I'm quite sure. When I heard that, because I saw the teasers leading up to it, I'm like, when's he going to drop this? When's he going to drop this? He dropped this documentary before, like a week before, and I watched it all, and I'm like, these guys are crazy, because they were doing crazy stuff. Like they weren't using presets from like VSTs. They were recording everything and manipulating that to make their synths and all that. And I was just like, when I listened to the music, I heard it, and I'm like, how do I create that? Like, because I was so intrigued by that. But yeah, like John Bellion, Timbaland, Pharrell, Kanye, Russ. Who else? I think they're like the main ones. I think that have really shaped my sound, I guess.
I think it's interesting that, I mean, multiple people have said Timbaland and Pharrell on like on the podcast already, and this is only the 11th episode. But I think the thing about those names and the reason why everyone picks them is because as soon as you hear something, you can pretty much tell. Apart from maybe Kanye, but even Kanye has a sound. But like all the other ones, like you know when you hear those producers,
straight away,
they have the sonic kind of aspect to it. They have some of the songwriting aspect to it.
It's very interesting though, because I listen to these producers now and these artists, what you want to call them, and like you hear them trying to reinvent their sound. And in my opinion, I believe they're obviously great at what they do, but I think because they were the first to do that kind of style, it's like now hard when like you hear advice from them to say you have to get outside the box and you have to try new stuff, because it's like everyone's like done most things before, unless you start reversing your whole productions and doing like 300 BPM. Like, how are you going to be different? Because it's like everyone's pretty much
very difficult these days, and like especially in a genre like hip hop, it's like Yeah, it's very, I don't know how, I mean, I guess it just comes down to experimentation and just trying different stuff, being with different people and trying to find new inspirations from different places and stuff. But tell me about your production. Because I mean, your productions, like I've known you for a few years now, and I can see the expansion of your sound over those like last few years, just listening to your playlist that you sent through that I'll have a link in the show notes to. But yeah, man, your sounds are like, I can definitely hear that, like the chops, you know, the different sounds coming in every bar, you know, all of that sort of cool shit that I love to hear in hip hop. Because I think the trouble with hip hop, and this is not a criticism on the genre, it's more the criticism on the ability to create your own sound is like, I love that when you can hear something new every bar and it's interesting and there's sounds coming from all different places and it's like, whoa, don't expect that. Yeah, tell me about that.
I think that all became like implemented for me. It was probably 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah, 4 years ago, I'd say, when I heard this interview with, have you heard of Max Martin?
Yeah.
The songwriter?
Yeah.
I heard this interview and he said every 4 bars, you want to introduce or remove an element. And that kind of like, for me, that was just like this light bulb moment because I'm like, all right, let's try to do that. And then at the start when I learned that, I was overkilling it because I'm like changing sections every 4 bars and it's like, how's an artist? Yeah, not cohesive.
Yeah.
And then, I guess over time practicing that's really stuck with me. So every time I'm producing and I have like this somewhat final product, I think that always comes into my head. I'm like, ooh, how can I spice this up?
How long does it take you to do a production?
Honestly, like now it depends. Even, I mean, rough ballpark, I can get a song pretty much done within like an hour. But it depends.
That's crazy.
Yeah, if I'm using like a sample and I'm chopping a sample, I could probably even do it quicker.
Yeah.
But if I'm creating like my own chords and melodies and whatnot, it might take me about an hour or depending how in depth I want to go and the genre too. Because like a lot of the trap music, you can do it pretty quick.
Sure.
The R&B stuff, it's a bit different because it's like you got to start thinking about like bridges and different breakdowns. Yeah, like A section, B sections. Whereas like trap's more just like 8-bar loop it,
cut some
drums,
stuff out,
808, cut some stuff out. Yeah,
put it
I'm
back
sure
in.
you know. So that's much quicker for me. But yeah, the R&B stuff, which I love and I'm diving into more. It takes a bit longer. Definitely.
Now, the artists that you work with, give us a few names. We've got NOMAD that you've been a long time collaborator with.
We got Soli.
Soli.
She's a dope R&B solo artist. George Myer. Dope artist.
RnB.
R&B. Brandon.
Brandon Stone.
I'm getting back into the studio soon with Agung Mango.
That latest, those newer tracks, they're fucking fire.
They're crazy. Who else? There's definitely a few. I'm doing a lot of mix work for Ali Eliades.
Okay,
I don't know how to say her name probably. Alicia Gomez.
Sure,
there's a few people, but mainly.
These artists that you work with, do they seek you out? Have you met through networking? What's the deal there?
So most of the artists I work with, they've either like seeked me out or it's been like a natural kind of thing that happens from networking. It's kind of like I'm at this event, see this artist, I'm like, wow, and then I'll reach out to them or vice versa. I'll say hi to them when I'm there, and then afterwards they'll be like, oh, let's work, or vice versa. That's kind of how it happens.
Yeah,
really.
That's awesome. When did you start to realize that was a good way about going things?
In terms of the networking? I think it would have been about 2019 when I was a part of this group called Day Hunted. And they would always like be performing small gigs in the city.
Sure,
and then it brought me out because before that I was not really going to gigs in the city. So it was that brought me out, that made me realize I'm meeting all these cool creatives because they're playing as well. And it's like, why don't I just go out a bit more? It is such
a huge part of what a lot of people just don't understand is like one being in the right place at the right time, but just the natural element of meeting new people just because their friends of friends, they're at different gigs. You know, even at seeing say you had like 4 artists that always play gigs together. Even at different gigs, you're going to have different people rock up because their friends are going to come and see.
100%.
And these things, like it's I can't explain it enough. How important that networking side of things is to meet new people.
Definitely.
And to find new artists to work with.
Yeah, I think also with that, I think something people should know is like, don't try to like oversell yourself. Like, especially if like you work like myself, you're a freelancer and you really want to work with an artist that's at a gig. It's like, just be you. Like, don't try and be something else, and don't try to be like, I'm like great at what I do. Yeah, I'm the best. Because it's like, let the music and the work speak for itself. It's like, you just come along, you say hi, like, and then let it all happen naturally. If they like your work, they're going to reach out to you.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about the sessions with these artists that you work with. Do they have their own like kind of individual, how am I trying to say it? With different artists, are there similar kind of aspects to the sessions, or do they all kind of work differently?
It's very interesting because like, I'm just thinking about like a couple of different artists now, and they're all different, like, and they all have different needs and all this. So it's like one artist in our sessions, it's like, we'll mainly do production and mixing.
Sure.
The recording, they're going to do it on their own.
Yeah, cool.
Because they've got that handled.
Yep.
But then you got other artists that like, they need you to do everything. So it's like, they need you to record them, produce, mix.
Yep.
So yeah, you work with artists like that. And then there's other artists that you get that already have production, and they're like, oh, do you want to add something to it? I want your touch onto it. And then it's like, add some touch, and then they come in, record vocals. It just depends. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's kind of different.
Yep. And how often would you say that like people really just want you to like put the final touches on things? Because I think that's one area that a lot of people don't really think of. I think like a lot of people just think that you do things start to finish when they, only see the tip of the iceberg. They're like, yeah, of course you would go into the studio, record the vocals, record the beat and mix it all in one go. Like, isn't that how it works? You know what I mean? Like, so how often is that final touches sort of?
It definitely happens often. But I've noticed certain artists, and I'd say mainly the R&B artists, it's like, there will be multiple collaborators on like a production. So it would be like, let's just say I start an idea, we'll shoot it off, send the files to someone else. Then they do something, send it back. I'll make like reiterations of what they've done, then maybe send it to someone else. And then like get this whole collaboration process going. And then like if I'm going to end up mixing the joint, they'll send it back, and I might make my little final touches and then mix it.
I love that.
It does happen often, but mainly with R&B artists, I've found.
So do you feel like they have more of a handle on the recording side of thing, or they songwrite themselves, or like is that?
Definitely. I think the recording process, it just varies between artists. A lot of artists I work with now, they record themselves. And I think it was that COVID transition.
100%. That would have had a big influx of people going, I can't go to a studio, so I got to figure out how to do this. And you start off being shit, and then you get feedback over time, and you're like, maybe when you record it, put a pop filter in front of it so there's no plosives.
Maybe don't eat the microphone too. That's a big one that I try tell artists, because I get files all the time, and it just
or like they put too much compression on because they think they're supposed to, and or something like that.
And then it's also, once you get those files, they've got their requirements and what they want from it. And it's like, can you make me sound like this Ariana Grande song? It's like, maybe if you record it properly with like a better mic and a bit of this and a bit of that, maybe I could. But it happens a lot. And it's a hard thing to work around. But,
I've been noticing just based on like videos I've been watching and, some commentary on some of the podcast stuff that we've been sharing and stuff, is there's a real division between people that like to receive mixed stems dry or wet, and just even the conversation around that is really interesting, because I think a lot of people see videos on YouTube and stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, of course you have to do it this way, or you have to do it that way. How do you like to receive stems from an artist?
It all depends on the artist at the end of the day. Like I can think of certain artists that I work with where they've got their sound to how they like it, but they know it's not like there. It doesn't have that kind of professional touch, if you want to say. So with those artists, I'll request like grouped out, like let's just say we're talking vocals, right? I'd say grouped out like BVs wet, lead wet, harmonies wet, ad-libs wet.
Yep.
And then I'll also get them to send obviously all the dry.
Sure.
So then it's like when I'm mixing, it's kind of, I got this target and I know kind of where to go.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'll get it to that point and then I'll add my thing to it.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, but I love like, if it's just dry, I'm happy because a lot of artists can't really do their own mixes, but it depends artist per artist. Like,
it's very interesting. And I work with a couple of producers that send me stems for mixing, and even depending on the vocalist that they have on their productions, it can really vary how, you know, how dry or wet the stems are and how much processing how much compression they put on it, and it just makes each mix different. I am more on the I like things dry, especially vocals. I mean, mixed song elements like, you know, drum beats and synths and bake it all in.
Yeah,
bake it all in. I love
thing,
that.
definitely.
Yeah, and if a producer has a really good handle on how they want a beat to sound. Cool. Yeah. I'm all about it. Even give me the beat. Like I'm totally, I mean, I would prefer to have more control over it. But vocals, I am more on the side of give me the dry stuff just because there are certain things that, you know, that we might do that give a song a sound or give our mixers a certain sound.
Yeah. Another thing to add to that is a lot of artists, they kind of do a rough mix on their own, but the issue with it, and they might think in their headphones or their speakers that it sounds good, but most of the times what I've found, the people that use headphones is the headphones they have like a 10 dB boost at 10K and all their stuff's very dull and like, and it's like for that, I'm sure you made it sound good with your system, but it's like listening to it kind of flat sounds pretty bad. Yeah. So it's like, that's something I wish like a lot of people, it's like artists, like artists really knew about. Because then even when they listen to mixes and it might sound dull on those headphones, really it's not. Yeah. Or like it might, you know what I mean?
No, 100%, 100%. I think it's hard because you don't know what you don't know. And the best thing that I can offer artists is to ask the producer or mixer what they want. In advance so that they don't bake things in if we don't want it that way, you know, and it just means that the end product, you'll get to it easier, but it'll probably also sound a lot better. And so, that's my 2 cents on it.
Nah, definitely.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much for listening so far. There is plenty more to come, so don't go anywhere. I just wanted to let you know that this podcast is made completely independently by myself with no sponsors. So if you like what you hear and you would like to show your support, you can send a donation to the PayPal link, paypal.me/whatsthatsound. The link is also in the show notes. Thanks so much for your support, and let's get back to it. Talk to me about, have you had kind of any experiences over the past few years where things haven't felt right or like things haven't gone the way that you planned, and how did you go about navigating that?
In terms of sessions or just in general?
Or even you know, communication or anything like that.
I think I've had this a couple times, but it'll be an artist that wants me to mix their stuff. And before we start, I just make sure like they tell me what they want from it. And certain artists, sometimes I found they don't like the end result that I do because it's a bit too swayed from their initial reference. And I think sometimes what I've done is I've just accepted that that's how they feel. But other times I try and make a compromise and I try like explain to them the reasons why I made certain things sound the way they did. And if they don't like it at the end of the day, like it's up to the client. Like I'm not going to have hurt feelings and try to like fight them on it and try be like, I'm right, you're wrong. I just let them because they're the one, it's their music.
Absolutely.
So I've had that a few times. And like I said, I just try just let them make the final decision.
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
I'm gonna do a good job, but if it's not what they want at the end of the day, it's not what they want.
Totally. And I think a lot of that comes down to the communication that happens prior to you doing the job. And so do you have a certain way of going about like, you know, communicating with a new client prior to starting a job or is it different every time?
I mean, it could be, yeah, it's a little bit different every time. But for new artists, I kind of just get them to tell me like exactly what they want from it. And if they kind of in that process of pre-production, let's say, if they have an expectation that I don't think I'm going to be able to meet, I'll be open and honest before we even begin work.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, at least this artist knows like, I might not be able to meet that expectation of that certain thing that they asked for. So I guess doing that, it removes a bit of pressure also, but also like disappointing the clients. Because then, you've kind of let them know.
Well, I think it's good because at the end of the day, we and all of these conversations revolve around us being in a service industry. Like our job is to provide someone with a service. You know, they're coming to us with an idea of what they want. Whether they can explain it very well or not, all we can do is to try and understand what they want at the end of it before we've even started it. And that's where that like that clear communication, being like, tell me more about what you want. Tell me your influences. Give me reference tracks. Tell me a great mix that you loved recently that I can listen to, so I can try and fully understand what that picture is before I even touch the track.
And a lot of artists don't know what they want. And that's a hard thing to work around because I've had a few artists like that. And that just makes the process a little bit more difficult and a little bit more experimental. But I think if it's clear before anything begins, then it's kind of pressure off both people. Because it's like, if you don't know what you want, I'm going to try a few things and see what you like, and then we'll see how we go.
And I think that's a cool place to be as well, because then for me, I mean, I've started this podcast. I like educating, and it's a really important thing for me to help the artists that I work with. I love working with newer artists because it's like there's so much to learn, and when you're at that point where you don't know your sound, you don't know how to do things properly, it's like, cool, I can help you with that. Let's organize a session where we can talk about anything, whatever it might be. It might be marketing, it might be this, it might be that, but it's a cool place to be in because there's so much that we can offer with our experience, and it's something that you don't think of a lot.
I think it goes both ways too, though. Like, because I've learned a lot from artists. And it's like working with certain artists, I'll be teaching them because I'm kind of the same. I like kind of teaching and educating. But then on the flip side, as I'm in the recording process, let's say, I learn so much from these artists that then I can implement in other artists that are not so experienced.
Give us some examples.
So it's kind of like if I was to work with an R&B artist, they're very heavy on background vocals and harmonies and all this. So working with then a rap artist, the way that I've found I could teach them and implement it with them is kind of like, instead of just doing that one take over that hook, double it up. Try like this different harmony. Try adding certain ad-libs in the pockets. Like, try all this stuff, and kind of you learn that from working with like the R&B artists that are more experienced, in my opinion and my experience. So it's like, it helps you pass it down to the people with less experience. And then I've found so many times I'll do something, and I might even tell an artist, like a rap artist, and I'll be like, do this 5 times. And they'll be like, nah, I only got to do it in one take. Only got to do it in one take. I'm like, trust me, do this in 5 times and let me show you what I mean. And a lot of the times it's really paid off, and they're just like, what did you do? And I'm like, just doubled it up multiple times, and it just gives it that feel that you were after, and it just something that they wouldn't have known to do because they think, oh, it's all in the mix. But it's like, nah. You got to think of this as a recording artist too.
I love it. I think even if you're just an engineer, which I don't know anyone that is just an engineer. Pretty much all the engineers I know are producers as well. But that production element is important when it comes to recording. It's important when it comes to mixing and somewhat mastering, but not as much. But it still allows you to think outside the box and having the picture in our head of what it needs to be and how to get it. That's what a producer's job is.
Definitely.
And I love that.
It's like, like I just explained, like I hear some of these like more inexperienced artists, I hear their music and I'm like, this is great, but it needs those small things where it's like double up certain things, add a harmony or whatever to really give it that feeling that they were trying to do that I could hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. The similarity that I compose is like when I'm like trying to get some weird ass guitar tone or putting in some weird synth that's like it's like if you listen to this in isolation, you're like, this is the worst shit ever.
Yeah.
But then it's like, trust me, when you get to the end of the song, this is going to be the part in the song that you fucking love.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Definitely. I agree for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Let's get nerdy and let's talk about our favorite pieces of gear. Let's start off with hardware. Do you have like favorite microphones or bits of hardware that you love?
To be honest, the whole hardware world, like the analog gear, I'm not big on it because I've just got a small studio and I'm mainly in the box. But yeah, I currently rock with the TLM 103 mic.
Beautiful.
And I love that.
Yeah, we got that here.
I've kind of like in the early days with the microphone, I loved it more. But now as I'm getting more experience, I'm kind of realizing, damn, maybe this is like, because for certain vocalists, it can be very harsh.
Yeah, very females especially.
Yeah, just very harsh. Sibling. And also I found like the low mid range is just hard to control in that microphone specifically. So yeah, but I think it comes down to learning your gear as well, because it's like you can have a $15,000 microphone, but if you don't know what that thing's doing, how are you gonna do it? Like, how are you gonna mix it? Like,
it's truth.
So it's like you can even use a cheap microphone, let's just say, and get it to sound somewhat good if you know the ins and outs of that mic.
Yeah,
you know what it needs in terms of the mix.
I think it's harder for. I mean, I work on a lot of like rock music and pop music where there's a lot of live instruments and stuff, but for vocals, if you are limited to only one mic or two mic, that can be really hard to like figure out, man, it just doesn't work with this vocalist for some reason. It works so well on the other person, but why isn't it working today? And you're right, it could be the way they sing, it could be the area that you're recording in. You might have it in a different area of the room, like anything, the distance between where they're singing it. Yeah.
That was a big thing for me, because I always learned at university, like distance between the microphones important, but for certain kind of styles and certain genres, it really plays a difference, like how close or how far you are to the mic. Obviously, like you kind of need to be in a somewhat treated room to be able to play with that distance, but yeah, I've found like I listen back to some of the mixes I've done and I'm like, why does this sound so good? And then some other mixes on the same microphone sound a bit over compressed and a bit this. And I realize it has a lot to do with the distance. Which is something, that I didn't really pay attention to early days.
Yeah,
but
and
now
I think the artist doesn't always know what good mic technique is as well and stuff. And I mean, for me, because 90% of the time I have the microphone in the other room. And so I can't clearly see all the time where they've got the mic positioned. And so I have to kind of trust that and you have to trust your ears and be like, well, something's off here. Like, why is it a bit duller than normal?
Artists just like to eat the microphone. They like to just be so up close. And it's like, because a lot of them want to hear themselves more. And they just want to be like loud in their headphones. So they're sitting there going closer because it's obviously louder.
But that's another important thing to know is like, and that only comes with time and experience when you know that someone's doing something a certain way. It's like, yo, is the vocal not loud enough in your headphones or something? Like, I'll turn it up for you. Like,
100%, definitely.
Let's go software. What DAW are you using?
I'm using Ableton, Pro Tools. I've dabbled in Logic a little bit. But yeah, Ableton and Pro Tools are the main ones that I use.
Talk us through.
Yeah, so Ableton is mainly for production. And recently, because I I'd say 3 months ago, I had an issue with my Pro Tools where I bought a new MacBook and it was the M1.
Yeah.
And the whole softwares hadn't kind of, and then I had some issue with my Pro Tools and a certain plugin, which was auto-tune, but had this issue and I'd open my session and then it'd just bug out on Pro Tools. So then I'm like, shit. And I had people coming through and I'm like, I need to make this work. I need to like figure this out. And I was on the phone every day to Avid and whatever. And then it forced me to like use Ableton for not only production, but mixing too and recording. So I kind of like had to really, because I've usually just mainly used Ableton for production.
It's so difficult for me to understand, man. Like, anyway, but but for recording, it's like,
it's
like probably one of the hardest softwares to use.
Definitely. But I kind of just made it work for that short period of time, and it made me force myself to learn mixing on that. Yeah. But I mainly use Pro Tools for the recording and the mixing and mastering stage. I've tried producing in Pro Tools and nope.
The MIDI integration.
It just is not happening. It's not happening. But
nice. And let's go like VSTs. I was trying to think of the word, but so EQ. Let's start with EQ.
Always jumping for the Pro Q, which is just a given. But one thing I've changed since coming back from my seminar not too long ago is
we'll talk about that by the way. Let's keep going with the software though.
Not using like your eyes as much, and using more your ears. So I've kind of tried to. I experimented with turning off the graphic display of the Pro Q, and that was very interesting. But I'd say the Pro Q. There's another one called DSEQ. I love it. It's by TB Pro Audio.
Cool.
I love that thing. It's kind of like a Soothe.
Okay,
where it's like a dynamic resonance suppressor.
Sick.
And then also I love using like the C4.
You were the one that told me about using it as a de-esser back in the day. Or the C1 you were talking
C1.
about.
I use the C1 here and there too. But the C1 is cool too. Especially
I'd never even thought about it. It was like, it was one of those like, whoa, this is actually pretty sick.
It does, because I love the look ahead thing. The look ahead feature. Because it really grabs those S's. It is a bit harsh, but it grabs them.
I think software's come a long way since those old waves plugins, unfortunately for them. But also, I hate their business model. But anyway, we won't get into that. What about compressors?
Compressors, I'm always reaching for the R-Comp by Waves. I don't know why.
Simplicity?
It's just good.
Transparent?
It's just really good, I found. I reach for the RVox as well, very simple, but it's got this nice character, especially for vocals. The CLA 2A, I love that thing. I haven't been able to really work the 76.
Right.
Don't know why. Maybe it's the Waves one. I just don't like that, but I haven't been able to work that.
We'll talk through that after this podcast.
Another good EQ plugin that I use it's from Apogee. It came with my interface. It's the EQ P1, which is the Pultec.
Cool.
It's like an emulation of that. And I love the sound of that thing. Like especially for kicks, 808s. That thing just brings it 100%. Like all up.
I love using Pultecs on live basses and kick drums, but there is something about that bottom end that just like gives it this like pillowy warmth that not many other EQs can achieve.
I agree.
Because they end up distorting. I found the Pultec doesn't. I don't know why, but it just feels so warm.
It's smooth.
Smooth.
It just adds what you need. You just turn it up a little bit and you're like, it just gives you what you've been missing.
What other VSTs do you have that you're like, couldn't live without?
Let me think. Auto-tune. I think that's very it's just
it is what it
is.
Are you always using just the auto mode? Do you use graphical mode much or anything like that?
No, I just use the auto mode to be honest. But one thing, because I work with R&B artists a lot, one thing I find, if the artist likes the sound of auto-tune, most of the times you don't put auto-tune on them. But if they like that sound, what I found is they're doing a lot of things out of scale. So it's like you can't just set up E flat minor and hope that it's going to work, because a lot of the times they're jumping out. So it's like you got to automate the little piano notes at the bottom to activate them at certain times and deactivate them. So yeah,
awesome.
that's interesting. What are the plugins?
What are you using to make beats? Like talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. So I use Expand too. It's like a stock Pro Tool. It comes with Pro Tools.
Right.
But you could also buy it outright. And I bought it and I use it for production. This thing is just like it's got every kind of sound that you can think of. It's got like leads, it's got pads, it's got keys, brass stuff. It's just this one-stop shop. And I tell everyone, I'm like, the sounds are pretty bad. Like stock, straight out. But it's like what you do with them. And I find, because they have a very simple, like in stripped back bass, it allows a lot of room for me to be creative with it. And because it's a VST that has all the sounds there, I just load that in. It barely takes up any CPU and just go hard with it.
Yeah,
and I find myself every production, I find myself with that. On every production. And then I'm big on using Splice too. I love that thing. It's just cool. It's cool. Like you get instant inspiration. Even when you feel like if you haven't used any samples and you're creating production from scratch, you need something to elevate it to that next level. You just jump on Splice, kind of find a rough tempo or whatever, and then chuck it in. But another thing, I don't really use too many VSTs, to be honest. I just use the stock drum rack from Ableton. I use the stock sampler for 808s.
I think that's cool as well, man. Like another producer that who was on the podcast, Supreme, he was similar. He's like, there's just not, I mean, when you have a good idea of not only the understanding of the tools that you're using, but also the end picture, and you know your tools, it's like, I know how to get there. Definitely. And you just don't need that much. It's like you're not experimenting that much. And if you're in a session, you don't want to be sitting there for an hour trying to find a sound with the client. Client's going to be like, fucking hurry up.
Yes. And that's one thing, that like people think you need all this gear and they think you need the best plugins. It's like, no, like you really don't. You just need to learn what you want and how to achieve that. Because you can use stock stuff. I can definitely produce a song with just stock sounds. And plugins, obviously. But
yeah, nice, man. Well, I like to finish off these podcasts with getting some advice. I mean, you've already given us a ton, but I just will, first of all, for producers that might be in their first few years of producing, let's start with them, and then artists.
Yeah, I think production, something I could give it an advice for production, it would be to listen to a lot of different genres, find out what you like the certain elements and the feeling that you like from those different genres, and try to implement it yourself. And like, if you're not as musically talented to be able to play that out by yourself, I think learn how to manipulate like MIDI. Learn how to manipulate MIDI to make it sound somewhat real, if that's what you're going for. Also, I'd say it's all just how passionate you are and how much you want to learn and expand your knowledge. It's like, if you want to get into production, you got to spend countless hours producing, but also learning. So be on YouTube endlessly. Like, I'm always up. Like when I'm having breakfast in the morning, I'm on YouTube. When I'm when I'm taking a break, I'm just on YouTube. And maybe it's a bad thing, but it's knowledge overload. It's knowledge overload.
Like, I'll sit up a chair. I know it's not in frame, but there's a chair, and I'll put my fucking food on there and I'll watch a YouTube over while I'm eating lunch. Otherwise I'm outside, but for production, I think. Engineers? What about engineering and mixing and
engineering, mastering? I'd say learn the tools. But learn the basics really well. Like, learn EQ, really learn it. Learn compression. Just like, because compression in my opinion is a bit daunting, because it's like we just watch YouTube videos. They have their preset and you just copy that.
And they already understand how to use a compressor.
Exactly. And you just somewhat copy it. But if you really break down and you go extreme on a compressor to hear what it's doing, yeah, I think it's super important.
And the
Super
different
important.
tones that each compressor has really gives you a palette to know which compressor to use in which scenario, you know, and like the tones from all the different types of compressors, and some of them have different knobs on them. So understanding what each of those means, some of them work different ways. You got to push the sound into some compressors like a 76, whereas you got to lower the threshold for other ones. So there's heaps to compression.
Also, I think for mixing, a big thing that took me a decent amount of time to really understand is, because you're hearing something on one system, it doesn't mean that's exactly what you're hearing. It's like we spoke about earlier, if you're putting on these cheap headphones, they've got a bump at 100 hertz for like 6 dB, and you think your bass is right, and then you think your top end's right, but it's
another, 100%.
So you got to, I think it's really pay attention to your system and learn what you've got. Test it out on multiple different systems just to really get an understanding, because I found for a long time my mixes weren't translating, and I was like, why? And then it wasn't until I did some research and I realized, I'm like, shit, these like headphones I'm using, or shit, these monitors I'm using has this that is causing these mixes not to be translatable. So I would say a big thing with mixing is learn what you use. Like your monitors, your headphones. All of that. Definitely.
Love it. And what about some advice for artists that are just starting out?
That's a hard one. I would just say collaborate with as many people as possible. I think because, I notice a lot of the time, a lot of the artists, like, they get an ego and they don't want to like work with people because they believe they're like not as good as them. And it's like, by doing that, you're shooting yourself in the foot, because that artist you think is not that good, everyone else might love that artist and think they're great overnight, or however long they might just take off, and then you look a bit like
left in the dust. I love it.
But I think it's also like a learning thing too. Like collaboration is just huge across the board. Mixing, production. I think you have to. And that's one thing I'm glad that I do a lot, is just always working with different people to learn. Because like one of my uni teachers said, it's like you've got a tool belt. And it's like you learn stuff from people and you just add that to your tool belt. And then you just whip it out when you need it. You might not always go by what they say, but it's like it's there. So it's like,
I love that, man.
I think that's important.
I love it. Well, where can people find you online?
Instagram, IconicBeats with 2 S's. And Spotify, mainly Instagram.
We'll have the links in the show notes anyway. But sick, man. Anything that you want to plug before we head off?
No, not really, to be honest.
All good. Actually, before we go, this is for people that have lasted this long. Tell us a bit about your recent, just in a few minutes. Your recent
trip.
experience.
That was unreal. I didn't realize. Well, it was with Leslie Braithwaite, by the way. It was mixed with the Masters in France. That was eye opening. It was very crazy. It was obviously information overload. But he mainly just taught us to not get so caught up in like numbers and like what you visually, like what you see. It's like mixing, it's about ears and what you hear and what you feel. So it's like a lot of the times I, in the past, have got caught up with like, oh, this needs to be -5, or this needs to be this value, or this needs 100 hertz roll off. When it's like, nah. Like just listen to it.
I love that. Well, that's a really, really, really good point to finish on. I think awesome, man. But thank you again, and thanks to you all for listening and watching. Really appreciate your time. If you could do us a favor and share it with a friend, or share it on your socials, it goes a long way. And make sure to hit follow or subscribe so you get up to date with any new episode that comes out. We will see you next time on What's That Sound podcast. Thanks for listening to What's That Sound. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.